Ever wonder how a massive, complex national economy actually works? We're going to break it down today. And we're going to do it by starting from the very bottom using India as our guide to see how all the pieces fit together.
So really, how do you build an economy? It seems like this impossibly huge, complicated thing, right? But the secret to understanding the big picture is actually to start really, really small.
Think about it. Any huge system is just a bunch of small parts working together. So our story is going to start in the most basic unit of all, a single village. This is going to be our lab for understanding everything else. So let's head to our starting point, a village called Palampur. Now, it's a hypothetical village, but it's totally based on reality. It represents thousands of others just like it. With about 450 families and farming as the main gig, it's the perfect little microcosm to see the basic engine of an economy churn.
Okay, so to make anything, I don't care if it's a stalk of wheat or the latest smartphone app, every economy on Earth needs 4 essential ingredients. They call them the factors of production. First, you've got land, which is basically all your natural resources. Then, labor, that's the human muscle and effort. Third is physical capital, your tools, your machines, your money. And finally, the secret sauce that brings it all together, human capital. That's the know-how, the smarts.
Let's dig into that physical capital bucket for a second, because there's a really important distinction here. On one hand, you've got fixed capital. This is the big stuff you use over and over for years: tractors, buildings, heavy machinery. Then you have working capital. This is the stuff you use up in the process, raw materials like seeds, or just plain cash to pay the bills. Think of it like this. The factory building is fixed capital, but the electricity and the raw steel used today are working capital.
So, before all the modern farming tech came along, a farmer in Palampur, what could they expect to get from their land? We're talking about 1,300 kilograms per hectare. That was the baseline, you know? That was the rhythm of life that families had depended on for generations.
And then, bam! Everything changed. The Green Revolution hits in the late 1960s. And with things like new high-yield seeds and better irrigation, that same piece of land could suddenly produce 3,200 kilograms. That is a massive leap, almost 2.5 times more. It was an absolute game changer for agriculture in India.
But here's the thing. Bigger harvests didn't magically solve every problem. Not by a long shot. Some really deep-seated challenges remained. First, you can't just make more land. What you have is what you have. Second, that land was divided up really unequally. In our village, a full third of the families owned no land at all. And third, all those new seeds and tools for modern farming, they cost money, capital that the small farmers just struggled to get their hands on. So this tells us that better land and better tools are only part of the story. The next piece of this economic puzzle, and maybe the most critical one, is the people themselves. Let's look at how they can become a country's single greatest resource. To really get this, check out the story of 2 friends, Sakal and Vilas. Sakal gets an education, he gets vocational training in computers, he ends up landing a good job, he's super productive, he even designs new software. Now look at his friend Vilas. He didn't get access to education or healthcare. He ends up stuck doing the same tough, low-income job his mother did. Same starting point, but 2 completely different lives, all because of one key investment.
And that investment is what economists call human capital. It's the skill, the knowledge, and the health that we all carry around with us. It's the thing that flips a switch, turning a population from just a group of people that needs to be supported into a productive asset that drives the whole economy forward. Human capital is what makes everything else useful.
So, we have the pieces, right? Land, capital, people. But when a huge part of your population doesn't get that investment to become productive, well, that's when you run smack into the biggest obstacle for any growing economy.
And that obstacle is poverty. In the period from 2019 to 2021, about 15% of India's population was living in what's called multidimensional poverty, which means they lack the basics in health, education, and living standards. But here's the good news. That is a huge drop from 25% just a few years earlier. So real progress is being made, but the challenge is still immense.
Now, what's really important to understand is that poverty doesn't affect everyone equally, not even close. While the national average back in 2011-12 was 22%, for scheduled tribes, it was a staggering 43%. This just goes to show that poverty isn't only an economic problem. It's deeply tangled up with social structures and history.
So, if poverty is the core problem, and its most immediate, painful symptom is hunger. How on earth do you build a system to tackle that on a national scale? Well, it really comes down to these 3 A's. You see, food security isn't just about having enough food around. First, you need availability. Is there actually enough food in the country? Then you need accessibility. Can that food physically get to everyone, no matter where they live? And finally, there's affordability. Can people actually afford to buy it? You need all 3 legs of that stool, or the whole thing collapses.
And here is how India's massive food system tries to achieve that. It's a colossal 4-step process. First, the government buys surplus crops from farmers at a guaranteed price. Second, all those grains are stored in a giant national buffer stock. Third, from there, the food is distributed to a network of over 500,000 fair price shops all over the country. And finally, step 4, families can go to those shops and buy the food they need at a heavily subsidized price. The logistics of this are just mind-boggling.
But this system has actually created a bizarre new challenge, the problem of plenty. Take a look at these numbers from 2022. The minimum required buffer for wheat was about 27.5 lakh million tons. The actual stock, nearly 160. For rice, the stock was more than 7 times what was required. So managing this incredible surplus and the huge cost of buying and storing it has become one of the system's biggest headaches.
Okay, let's pull it all together. Let's zoom back out and look at the final picture we've built, connecting all the dots from that tiny village to the entire nation. We started our journey in a single farmer's field in our imaginary village of Palanpur. From there, we scaled up to see how human capital gets built, how the challenge of poverty persists, and finally, how these huge national policies try to solve those fundamental issues. Production, people, poverty, and policy, they're all part of the same story.
And all of this brings us to the ultimate purpose of this whole economic engine. As Mahatma Gandhi once said, India would be truly independent only when the poorest of its people become free of human suffering. It's a powerful reminder that at the end of the day, an economy isn't just about numbers and yields and buffer stocks, it's about people.